As the role of data becomes increasingly central in shaping policy, research, and governance, one critical question continues to rise. Who owns and controls Indigenous data? This is where tribal data sovereignty begins. To understand tribal data sovereignty, let's first define tribal sovereignty. It is the inherent authority of Indigenous tribes to govern themselves. Tribal data sovereignty refers to the inherent rights of Indigenous nations to govern the collection, ownership, and application of data related to their people, lands, resources, and cultural heritage. Tribal values, principles, and Indigenous ways of knowing and doing make them the most equipped to manage and control their data and determine standards for governance of that data, including cultural and traditional practices, health data, enrollment information, sacred sites, land boundaries, tribal government activities, financial information, oral history, economic development information, research, and much more. This principle is grounded in the inherent sovereignty of tribal nations and supported by international instruments such as the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, known as UNDRIP, which affirms the right of Indigenous peoples to control their own information and knowledge systems. Why does tribal data sovereignty matter? For too long, data about Indigenous communities has been collected, analyzed, and stored by outside institutions, such as governments, researchers, and corporations, often without consent or benefit to the communities themselves. This has led to misrepresentation, exclusion from policy decisions, and the erasure of Indigenous perspective. Tribal data sovereignty is about shifting that paradigm. It ensures that data reflects Indigenous realities, supports nation building, and aligns with cultural values and priorities. Tribal nations in the USET region are leading innovative efforts to reclaim and govern their data. So let's look at some real-world examples from the USET region. One tribal nation is developing proactive best practices for the management of data and information for cultural and important archaeological places. This includes the review and analysis of technical data provided by offshore wind energy developers to assess adverse effects on those ancient submerged landforms, traditional cultural properties, and significant areas for consideration of future offshore renewable energy development. Another tribal nation invested in building a medical institutional review board and health data infrastructure to protect the nation and its citizens, to ensure a mutual and beneficial partnership between the tribal community and researchers, and to ensure that all health-related research activities respect, promote, and benefit the health of tribal citizens. To uphold their commitment to ensure that service delivery is tailored to tribal needs, improving patients' access to their own health data, and employing state-of-the-art security measures to protect data, an additional USET member tribal nation's health center transitioned to a new electronic health record system. One more example from the region demonstrates how a tribal nation collects and governs community-level data to address substance use and behavioral health, emphasizing culturally grounded prevention strategies. USET promotes data sovereignty by supporting member tribal nations in developing policy, capacity, and infrastructure that reflect tribal data priorities. Whether you're a policymaker, researcher, student, or ally, you have a role to play in supporting tribal data sovereignty. Here are some approaches. Learn about Indigenous data governance frameworks and the history of data exploitation. Ensure tribal nations have access to and ownership of data about themselves. Respect tribal protocols and obtain informed consent prior to data collection. Support Indigenous-led data initiatives through funding, collaboration, and advocacy. Partner ethically with tribal nations, ensuring that data benefits Indigenous communities first and foremost. Data is power, but only when it serves those to whom it belongs. Tribal data sovereignty is not just a matter of ethics, it's a matter of rights, justice, and self-determination. Let's work towards a future where tribal nations own their data, tell their stories, and shape their futures on their terms.